What's your rate publicly humiliating? One night or by the hour? Because HR sure didn't hire you for your brain.
Grant, your TerraVolt position, something's not...
Not what?
The numbers, they don't add up.
Now he turned, slow.
You want to check my numbers? Fine. Sit down. Show us a trade. Let's see what food stamp fingers can do with 30 million.
11 analysts, dead silent. Her hands were shaking.
Okay.
Overnight. My trade against yours, loser, clears their desk by morning.
He shouldn't have said that. Because what she found in those numbers, that floor, was never the same.
Man. But before all that, you need to hear where this girl came from. 2 words changed everything on that floor. Not Grant's words, Brianna's. Bet me. The moment she said it, 11 heads lifted. 11 pairs of eyes suddenly found somewhere to look. Not at her, not at him. At the space between them, where the air had turned sharp enough to cut. Grant straightened his tie. A reflex. The same way a man checks his watch when he doesn't know what to say.
5 million simulated, he announced, loud enough for the back row. Same sector, overnight window. She picks her side, I pick mine. Loser packs their desk before the opening bell. He pointed at Brianna without looking at her. That means you. Tomorrow morning. Cardboard box. Elevator. Brianna said nothing. She sat down, opened her terminal. 3 screens lit up blue.
The floor buzzed. Side conversations, quick texts under desks. Word moved through the building the way fire moves through dry grass. Fast, messy, impossible to contain. By noon, even the interns on the 3rd floor knew. The Oracle had just bet his reputation against the only black analyst on the 7th floor. At 2:15, Nina Torres, senior trader, 12 years at the firm, the only person who had ever forwarded one of Brianna's reports to the risk committee, stopped at her desk.
You know what you're doing? Brianna didn't look up. I've known for 3 months. Mina paused, studied her face, then nodded once and walked away. At 3:58, 2 minutes before market close, Brianna entered her position. Short, TerraVolt energy. 5 million notional. Entry at 62.40. Put options underneath. Strike 55, expiring Friday. Clean, tight, surgical.
Across the floor, Grant went long, doubled down, added call options at 75 strike. No hedge. He never hedged. Hedging was for people who questioned themselves, and Grant Whitfield hadn't questioned himself since his first bonus check cleared. 4 o'clock. Market closed. Both positions locked. The earnings call was at 8. Only one of them had read the Houston subsidiary filings. Only one of them knew what that call was going to say. And only one of them went home that evening and opened a personal Bloomberg terminal, bought with 3 years of savings. Not to hope, not to pray, but to watch the exact moment when the numbers proved what she had known all along. Brianna Coleman grew up in the part of Baltimore that doesn't make the tourism brochures. Franklin Terrace, East Side, a neighborhood where the streetlights flickered more often than they worked, and the corner store had bulletproof glass between the cashier and the customers. She shared a 2-bedroom apartment with her mother, Dorothy, and her younger brother, Elijah. The walls were thin enough to hear the neighbors argue. The roof leaked every March. Dorothy Coleman worked 3 jobs. Mornings at a commercial cleaning company, office buildings downtown, the kind with marble floors and men in suits who never looked at the woman mopping around their shoes. Afternoons at a laundromat on North Avenue. Weekends stocking shelves at a grocery store that would close permanently 2 years later. She never missed a rent payment. She never missed a parent-teacher conference either. Brianna was 10 when she found a torn copy of the Wall Street Journal on the bus. Someone had left it on the seat, crumpled, coffee-stained, half the pages missing. She read the part that was left. She didn't understand most of it, but she understood enough to realize that numbers, the right numbers, read the right way, could move more money in a day than her mother earned in a year. She asked her school librarian for more. The librarian gave her a book on basic economics. Brianna finished it in 4 days and came back asking for another. By 14, she was tracking stock prices in a spiral notebook. By 16, she had built a paper portfolio that outperformed the S&P 500 by 11% over 2 years. Her math teacher, Mrs. Patterson, wrote a letter to the Wharton admissions office, 3 pages single-spaced, that began with the sentence, "This student sees patterns in numbers the way musicians hear melodies in noise." Wharton gave her a full scholarship. She was the only student in her incoming class from a public school in Baltimore, the only one who had never been on an airplane before orientation weekend, the only one who packed her suitcase in a laundromat because her apartment didn't have enough floor space to open it at home. She graduated summa cum laude. 4 job offers. She picked Ashford Capital, not because it paid the most, but because its founder, Derek Ashford, had once said in a Bloomberg interview that he valued people who see what others miss. Brianna thought that meant something. She thought it meant her. It didn't. From day one, the floor made its hierarchy clear. Not in the org chart, not in the policies, in the silences. The way conversations dimmed when she approached the coffee machine. The way people shifted their chairs half an inch when she sat down at the conference table. The way her ideas got a polite nod in meetings and then appeared, reworded, repackaged, in someone else's presentation the following week. And then there was Grant. Grant didn't do subtle. He removed her from email chains and told her it was a system glitch. He assigned her data entry while the other junior analysts built models. When she flagged a risk in a biotech position that later cratered, Grant presented the finding to the CIO as his own. 3 people in the room knew. None of them said a word. The worst part wasn't the theft. It was the framing. Grant had a way of making his cruelty sound reasonable. She's still learning. She needs more seasoning. I'm trying to protect her from embarrassing herself. Each sentence designed to sound like mentorship. Each one a lock on a door she hadn't been allowed to open. She documented everything, not out of paranoia, out of habit. Dorothy Coleman had taught her children a rule before they could ride a bike. When people with power tell you nothing happened, you better have proof that it did. So Brianna kept records, emails forwarded to her personal account, screenshots of reports she authored that appeared later under other names, a spreadsheet, color-coded, date-stamped, of every idea she had brought to the table and where it ended up. 14 months, 43 documented incidents. But she didn't file a complaint. She didn't confront anyone. She did something more dangerous. She got better. Every night after the floor cleared, Brianna stayed late. Not performing for cameras, not trying to impress, working. Building a quantitative model that cross-referenced SEC filings, insider transactions, revenue patterns, and supply chain data across 9 sectors. She backtested it against 8 years of market history. She refined it. She broke it. She rebuilt it. She broke it again. By month 11, the model was producing signals that outperformed Ashford Capital's own quant desk by 600 basis points. She told no one. She kept it on her personal laptop. She waited. Not for permission, not for recognition, for the right moment. And on a Tuesday morning in October, standing 3 feet from a man who called her a stray and told her she'd never beat his trade, she knew the moment had arrived. Because her model wasn't guessing about teravolt energy. It wasn't speculating. It had flagged the stock 11 days ago. Every data point since then had confirmed the thesis. The Houston subsidiary's revenue was synthetic. The insider selling was accelerating. The earnings call tonight would blow a crater in the stock price. Grant Whitfield had $30 million riding on the opposite conclusion, and he hadn't looked at a single filing in 6 weeks.
Brianna had looked at all of them. Twice. The difference between Grant Whitfield and Brianna Coleman wasn't experience, it wasn't connections, it wasn't pedigree. It was this. Grant traded on reputation. Brianna traded on evidence. And tonight, the evidence was going to speak loud enough to shake the entire floor. The problem with TerraVolt Energy wasn't hard to find. It was hard to believe.
Brianna had first noticed it 3 months ago, on a Thursday evening when the floor was empty and the cleaning crew was vacuuming between the desks. She was running her model's weekly scan, a routine check across 400 mid-cap stocks, looking for divergences between reported fundamentals and market behavior. TerraVolt flagged immediately. Not a small flag. The kind of flag that makes you lean forward, check your formula, run it again, and then sit very still when the same number comes back.
The company's Houston subsidiary, TerraVolt Solutions South, had reported revenue of $84 million in the most recent quarter. On paper, that number looked reasonable. It fit the growth narrative that management had been selling to analysts for 2 years. It was the number that had convinced Grant Whitfield to build a $30 million long position. It was the number that every sell-side analyst on Wall Street had accepted without question. But Brianna didn't accept numbers without questions. That wasn't how Dorothy Coleman raised her. She pulled the subsidiary's accounts receivable. It had ballooned 40% in a single quarter, a pace that didn't match the revenue growth unless TerraVolt was booking sales that hadn't actually been collected. She pulled the cash flow statement. Operating cash flow was negative, despite reported profits. She cross-referenced vendor payments with public procurement records. 3 of the subsidiary's 5 largest listed customers had no public record of doing business with TerraVolt at all. Ghost revenue, phantom clients, a balance sheet built on air. She checked again. She checked a third time. The numbers didn't change. They never do when they're real. Then she pulled the insider trading data. In the last 60 days, 4 of TerraVolt's top executives had sold shares worth a combined $19 million. The CFO, a man named Lawrence Webb, had moved his option exercise date forward twice. Not back, forward, as if he was in a hurry to cash out before something happened. The general counsel had quietly sold his entire position through a family trust. The VP of operations had dumped shares 3 days after returning from a board retreat in Scottsdale.
These weren't portfolio rebalances.
These were lifeboats. Brianna built the case slowly, methodically, the way her mother folded laundry. Every edge lined up, every corner tight, nothing left to chance. She wrote a 12-page report, executive summary on page 1, data tables on pages 3 through 7, supply chain analysis on page 8. Her conclusion on page 9, circled in red. TerraVolt Solutions South was inflating revenue through channel stuffing and fabricated receivables. The stock was overvalued by at least 40%. When the truth surfaced, and it would, because earnings calls have a way of dragging truth into daylight, the price would collapse. She printed 1 copy, walked it to the risk committee meeting on a Monday morning. 4 people at the table: Philip Stanton, head of risk, 20 years at the firm, a man who avoided conflict the way some people avoid highway merges. Grant Whitfield, leaning back with his arms folded. 2 junior risk officers who hadn't spoken in a meeting since their first week. Brianna presented for 6 minutes. She walked through the receivables anomaly, the cash flow mismatch, the insider selling pattern. She showed the chart. 4 executives, $19 million in sales, 60 days. She laid the report on the table and waited. Grant didn't wait. "I'm sorry.
Are we seriously entertaining this? He looked around the table, not at Brianna, never at Brianna. She's been here a little over a year. I've been in energy markets since she was in middle school. Teravolt hits 80 by quarter end. That's not a guess. That's 18 years of pattern recognition. Philip Stanton picked up the report, flipped to page 9, read the circled number, put the report down.
Grant's track record speaks for itself, he said carefully. The way a man speaks when he knows someone is probably right, but isn't willing to pay the social cost of saying so. We'll keep an eye on it. Keep an eye on it. 4 words that meant, we see your work, we believe your data, and we are going to do absolutely nothing about it.
Brianna gathered her pages. She didn't argue. She didn't appeal. She had watched her mother get dismissed by landlords, by school administrators, by men who signed her paychecks and never learned her last name. Dorothy never begged twice. Neither would Brianna. She walked back to her desk, opened the model, ran the scan one more time, not because she doubted herself, but because she wanted the freshest data possible for what she was about to do. The numbers hadn't changed. The insider selling had actually increased since Friday. Teravolt was a bomb with a visible timer. And the only person on this floor who could hear it ticking was the one person everyone had decided not to listen to. That evening, Brianna did something she had never done at Ashford Capital. She stayed past midnight. Not working on the model. It was finished. She was writing something else. A trade plan. Entry points, exit triggers, hedge ratios, contingency scenarios if the earnings call was delayed or if the company pre-announced. She wrote it the way an engineer writes a blueprint. Every load calculated, every joint stress tested. No room for hope, no room for luck. Just math. When she finished, she saved the file, closed her laptop, and walked to the elevator. The floor was dark. The cleaning crew had come and gone hours ago. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. She pressed the lobby button and stared at her reflection in the elevator doors. Tomorrow, Grant Whitfield would make the biggest bet of his career against a woman he considered furniture. He would stake his reputation, his track record, and his position on a stock he hadn't properly analyzed in 6 weeks. And Brianna Coleman, the quota, the stray, the brown face on the company website, would be waiting on the other side of that trade with 3 months of research, 91 days of silence, and a model that had never been wrong. The elevator doors opened. She stepped out into the October night. Somewhere across the river, Grant Whitfield was at a steakhouse with clients, ordering his second bottle of wine, telling the same story about how he called the oil crash of 2014 before anyone else saw it coming. He didn't check a single chart that night. He didn't need to. He was the Oracle, and the Oracle had never been wrong. Until now. Nah, hold on. They told her to sit down? She had the receipts, ghost revenue, insiders dumping stock, and they said, we'll keep an eye on it? Imagine building a case for 3 months and getting patted on the head. I'd be done. She went back to her desk. Tuesday, market open. Brianna arrived at 5:45. The floor was dark. She didn't turn on the overhead lights. She didn't need them. 3 monitors was enough. She opened her model one last time. Not to verify. She had verified it 19 times in the past 11 days. She opened it to breathe. To sit with the numbers the way a pilot sits with the instruments before takeoff. Not checking. Trusting. Teravolt Energy. Ticker TRVT. Last close 62.80. Her model's fair value estimate $31. A 51% downside, and the earnings call was tonight. She reviewed her trade plan. Short $5 million notional at market open. Entry target $62.40. put options. Strike 55, expiring Friday, as a hedge in case the earnings call was delayed or the company tried to get ahead of the news with a pre-announcement. Total risk budget. She could afford a 12% move against her before the puts kicked in. The probability of that happening, according to her model, less than 4%. 96% confidence. 3 months of data. 91 days of silence. She closed the file and waited for the bell. At 7:15, the floor began to fill. Analysts arrived in clusters, coffee cups, laptop bags, the low hum of morning small talk. But today, the hum was different. Charged. Everyone knew about the bet. Nobody talked about anything else. 2 traders from the fixed income desk on the 6th floor came upstairs just to grab coffee. They didn't drink any. They stood near the kitchen, eyes moving between Grant's corner and Brianna's desk like spectators waiting for the first pitch. Grant arrived at 7:30, earlier than usual. He walked in wearing a new tie, navy with silver stripes, the kind of tie a man wears when he expects to be photographed. He stopped at the center of the floor, looked around, found Brianna at her desk. "Still here?" He said it loud enough for the row to hear. "Thought you might have come to your senses overnight." Brianna didn't turn around. "I came to make a trade." "Yeah, your last one." He laughed. A few analysts joined in, fewer than yesterday. At 9:28, 2 minutes before market open, Brianna placed her hands on the keyboard. She had rehearsed this entry 6 times on paper. She knew the exact sequence, the order type, the limit price, the option chain. 9:30. The bell rang. Brianna entered the trade in 11 seconds. Short teravolt, 5 million notional. Entry at 62.40, exactly where she wanted it. Confirmation flashed green on her screen. She bought the puts next. Strike 55. Expiration Friday. Premium $42,000. A small price for insurance she didn't think she'd need. She sat back, exhaled. It was done. Across the floor, Grant made his entrance into the position like a man spiking a football in the end zone. Long teravolt. 5 million. Entry at 62.40. The same price, the opposite direction. Then he added call options. Strike 75. Expiration in 2 weeks. No puts, no hedge, no downside protection of any kind. 75 by Friday, he announced to no one in particular. She's going to 80. I can taste it. He turned to the analysts near him. Who wants to go to dinner when this thing prints? First round's on the diversity program. More laughter. But this time, Brianna noticed something. Nina Torres, sitting 4 desks away, didn't laugh. She was watching Grant's position on her own screen, and her face had the expression of someone watching a man walk confidently toward a cliff edge in the dark. The morning drifted. Markets moved sideways. Teravolt traded flat. 62.30, 62.50, 62.40 again. No movement. No news. The kind of calm that makes inexperienced traders bored and experienced traders nervous. Grant wasn't nervous. At 11, he ordered lunch to his desk. Lobster roll from the place on Greenwich Street. He ate it while reviewing unrelated positions, occasionally glancing at Teravolt's price with the satisfaction of a man watching a pot that he was certain would boil on schedule. At 1:30, he took a personal call and laughed loud enough to turn heads 3 rows away. At 2, he forwarded a Bloomberg article about energy sector tailwinds to the entire team with a 1-word comment. Exactly. Nobody forwarded anything to Brianna. At 12:15, Nina walked to Brianna's desk. She didn't sit down. She leaned against the partition, arms crossed, facing away from Grant's side of the floor. His position is naked, Nina said quietly. I know. No hedge, no stops, no collar, nothing. I know. Nina looked at her, really looked at her. The way you look at someone when you're trying to decide if they're brave or insane. You've done the work on this? 3 months. And the model? Back-tested 8 years. Hit rate on earnings-driven moves, 89%. Teravolt specifically, flagged 11 days ago. Every signal since then has confirmed.
Nina nodded slowly. The earnings call is at 8.
I know.
And you're sure?
I'm not sure. I'm prepared. There's a difference.
Nina almost smiled. Almost. That's the first smart thing anyone on this floor has said all week. She tapped the partition twice and walked away. The afternoon crawled. 1 o'clock. 2 o'clock. Teravolt drifted between 62.20 and 62.50. The trading floor felt like a hospital waiting room. Everyone present, no one talking about the reason they were there. At 2:30, an analyst named Tyler Brooks walked past Brianna's desk and stopped. He was one of the 11 who had watched Grant call her a stray the day before, one of the 11 who had said nothing.
For what it's worth, he said quietly, not making eye contact. I read your report. Page 9. He walked away before she could respond. It was the closest thing to support she had received from anyone on that floor in 14 months. It lasted 4 seconds. She went back to her screen. At 3:45, 15 minutes before market close, Grant walked the floor one last time. He stopped at every desk, shook hands, told jokes, straightened his new tie in the reflection of a dark monitor. The victory lap of a man who hadn't won yet, but couldn't imagine losing. When he passed Brianna's desk, he paused. Last chance, Coleman. Pull the trade. Walk away. No shame in admitting you're out of your depth. I'm exactly where I need to be. Your funeral. He winked and kept walking. 4 o'clock. Market closed. Both positions locked in. 5 million against 5 million. Long against short. Reputation against research. Ego against math. The earnings call was in 4 hours. Brianna packed her bag, stood up, walked to the elevator without looking at anyone. She went home, took a shower, changed into a sweatshirt that had belonged to her mother, faded blue, frayed at the cuffs, the kind of thing you keep not because it's useful, but because it reminds you who you are when the world is trying to tell you you're someone else. She made a bowl of rice and black beans, the same meal Dorothy used to make on nights when money was tight and tomorrow was uncertain. She sat on her couch with her personal Bloomberg terminal open on the coffee table. The screen glowed in the dark apartment. Teravolt's after-hours price sat motionless at 62.40. At 7:55, she set her phone face down on the cushion beside her. At 7:58, she picked it up. Put it down again. At 7:59, she picked it up one more time. At 8 o'clock, the Teravolt Energy earnings call began. The CEO's voice came through flat, rehearsed, the cadence of a man reading a script he wished he didn't have to read. For the first 3 minutes, nothing happened. Then everything did. 8:03, the CFO's voice cracked mid-sentence. A small crack. The kind that happens when a man knows the words he's about to read will end his career, and there's no version of them that won't. We are revising our full-year revenue guidance downward. Teravolt Solutions South has identified material discrepancies in previously reported subsidiary revenue. The company has initiated an internal review and has been in preliminary discussions with the Securities and Exchange Commission regarding an informal inquiry. Brianna sat on her couch in the dark, Bloomberg on the coffee table, after-hours feed glowing. For 3 seconds after Webb stopped talking, the price didn't move. 3 seconds, the longest of her life. Then the chart broke. 62.40, 61, 59, 54. The numbers didn't fall, they collapsed, like a building losing its foundation, floor by floor. Sell orders stacked 10 deep. Market makers widened spreads. The bid side went hollow. Her phone buzzed. Nina Torres. 2 words. You knew. She didn't respond. The call continued. Revenue miss, negative 23% versus consensus. Houston subsidiary revenue restated from $84 million to $51 million. $33 million in phantom income, manufactured through fictitious invoices to 3 shell companies. The same 3 companies Brianna had identified in the report Grant threw in the trash without reading. CFO resigned, effective immediately. General counsel followed. CEO announced outside counsel retained, full cooperation with regulators. Then, the Q&A opened. A Goldman analyst asked about cash flow timing. The CEO paused 11 seconds before answering. The kind of pause that tells you the answer will only make things worse. A fund manager from Boston asked if additional restatements were coming. We cannot rule that out at this time. The stock dropped 4% during that sentence alone. A journalist asked about criminal referrals. The line went dead silent. Investor relations cut in. No further questions. The call ended. The damage didn't. By 8:20, the stock was at 46. By 8:35, 39. By 9, 31.15. Within 2% of Brianna's model target. 40 simulations, every variable stress tested, and the market had just confirmed what her spreadsheet had been saying for 91 days. Portfolio tracker. Short entered at 62.40. Current 31.15. Gain 2.5 million. Puts 42,000 that morning, now worth 680,000. Total 8,200,000. 5 to 8.2. In 2 hours. Still falling. Across the city, Grant sat at a steakhouse on East 54th, telling a client about the natural gas squeeze of 2019. Phone buzzed. Ignored. Again. Again. 3 in 10 seconds. TRVT. $38.40. Minus 38.5% AH. Read it twice. Excused himself. Steady voice. Shaking hands. Men's room. Door locked. Bloomberg. Password wrong twice. Third try. Long 5 million at 62.40. Current 37. Dropping. Down 1.8. Calls at 75. Bought that morning like a man ordering champagne before the race. Worth 0. No bid. Dead. Portfolio. 2,100,000. More than half. Gone in 90 minutes. Night desk. Hold music. Support line. Voicemail. Italian marble floor. Phone pressed to ear. Own reflection staring back from a mirror he couldn't meet. Nothing to do. Positions locked until morning. His rule. His words. His cage. He loosened the navy tie. Sat on the counter edge. 18 years of never being wrong. And the first time it happened because of the person he had publicly and repeatedly called furniture. 14 minutes in that bathroom. Client gone when he came out. Check on the table. Unpaid. In the car home, the driver tried small talk. Grant didn't answer. He sat in the back with his phone tilted away from the rearview mirror so the driver couldn't see the screen. Teravolt at 33. Then 31. Then 2980. Each notification buzzed against his palm like a small electric shock. He thought about turning the phone off. He couldn't. It was like watching your house burn. You can't help, but you can't look away either. Every dollar down was a year of reputation burning. Every tick was a word he'd said to Brianna, coming back in a voice he couldn't mute. Stray. Shelter dog. quota, bloodline, ceiling. The words didn't sound the same at 2980. They sounded like evidence. At 10:30, CNBC broke the story. Accounting irregularities, potential fraud. 3 analysts downgraded to strong sell. A 4th suspended coverage. Finance Twitter exploded. A popular account posted, "TerraVolt just became a case study. Someone is going to prison." 12,000 retweets by midnight. Reddit's Wall Street Bets had a thread, TRVT, next Enron, on the front page within an hour. Screenshots of the after-hours chart spread everywhere. That sickening vertical drop. The kind of chart that makes traders nauseous, even when it isn't their money. It was Grant's money. Simulated or not, it was his name, his call, his 18-year record. Spotless until tonight. 11:15. TerraVolt at 27 flat. Brianna's portfolio, 10,200,000. Doubled. 5 to 10. 3 hours 15 minutes. The man who called her a shelter dog was down 60% on the same stock, same night, opposite side of the same trade. She opened Nina's text. 2 words back. Page 9. Phone down. Mother's sweatshirt pulled tight. Manhattan skyline through the window. Same one she first saw from a Greyhound 4 years ago, next to a suitcase packed in a laundromat. No celebration. No calls. Dark apartment. Perfect stillness. Midnight. Grant in his Greenwich living room. Lights off. Laptop glow. Refreshing every 30 seconds. 12:30. His wife came down in a bathrobe. Stood in the doorway. Grant? What happened? Nothing. Go back to bed. She didn't move. You've been down here for 2 hours. I said it's fine. His voice was harder than he meant it to be. She flinched, went upstairs. He heard the bedroom door close. He stared at the laptop screen. The stock was at 26 and change now. He had lost another 100,000 since the last time he checked, 4 minutes ago. At 1 a.m., he searched TerraVolt SEC investigation. 14 articles in 3 hours. 2 mentioned Ashford Capital. 1 quoted an unnamed source. A senior portfolio manager at the firm had been aggressively long the stock. He knew who that unnamed source was. Everybody would know by morning. 2 a.m. Laptop closed, not because the bleeding stopped, because he couldn't watch anymore. He sat in the dark for another hour. One question on loop, a question he had never needed to ask in 18 years. What happens when the thing you built your entire identity around turns out to be wrong? What's left? He didn't find an answer. He didn't sleep either. 4:30. Brianna's alarm. 3 hours of rest. Enough. Shower. Charcoal blazer. Consignment store. First month at the firm. Nicest thing she owned. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. Same face. Same eyes. But something behind them had shifted overnight. Not arrogance. Certainty. The quiet kind that doesn't need to announce itself. Subway. Same train, same car, same seat by the door. A man across the aisle was reading the Financial Times. The front page had a small headline in the bottom left corner. TerraVolt energy shares plunge on restatement. Brianna saw it. Looked away. She didn't need a newspaper to tell her what she already knew. 6:30. Floor empty. Terminal on. Numbers loaded. Clean, absolute, undeniable. She pulled up the comparison screen. Put it on the main display. The big one. The screen every person would see the moment they stepped off the elevator. Then she waited. 6:50. First analyst. Saw the screen. Stopped mid-step.
stood there 10 seconds before remembering how to walk.
7 o'clock. 3 more. 5. 10. A half circle formed behind her desk. Silent. Reading. Processing. Tyler Brooks covered his mouth, the same mouth that had whispered page 9 to her yesterday and nothing else for 14 months. A woman from Risk whispered, "Oh my God," and turned away. 2 analysts from the 6th floor appeared, the ones who came for coffee yesterday. Today, they didn't pretend. They stood at the edge and stared.
Nina Torres arrived at 7:10. Screen. Brianna. No words. She pulled a chair 2 desks away, sat down, crossed her arms, and waited for the elevator. 7:15. The chime. Grant Whitfield stepped onto the floor. Yesterday's shirt. No tie. Eyes that hadn't slept. He walked 4 steps before the screen caught him. His feet stopped before his brain did. 23 people, standing still, not breathing.
Grant stared at the numbers for 8 seconds.
Nobody counted. Everybody remembered. He looked at Brianna. She was already looking at him. Not with anger, not with triumph. With the steady gaze of a woman who had said everything she needed to say in a 12-page report 3 months ago, and had just let the market finish her sentence.
He looked at the 11 analysts, the ones who laughed, the ones who looked away, the ones who said nothing for 14 months while he called a woman astray and told her that her mother's bloodline was her ceiling. Nobody moved. Grant opened his mouth, closed it. He didn't speak. The numbers had already said everything there was to say. 7:18. 3 minutes after Grant stepped off the elevator. Nobody had moved. Nobody had spoken. The trading floor of Ashford Capital was holding a silence so complete you could hear the air conditioning cycling through the vents. Then the elevator chimed again. Derek Ashford stepped out. The CEO of Ashford Capital was not a loud man. He didn't wear flashy ties. He didn't tell war stories. He was 61 years old, 6'3", and he moved through rooms the way weather systems move across a radar. Slowly, visibly, with the understanding that everything in his path would adjust. He had been monitoring both positions since yesterday afternoon. Compliance had sent him real-time updates. He had watched the earnings call from his home office in Tribeca. He had seen the stock collapse. He had seen the numbers on both sides of the bet, and he had made a decision before his driver picked him up at 6:45 this morning. He walked to the center of the floor, stopped, looked at the comparison screen, read the numbers, then turned to face the room. Everyone, here, now. It wasn't a request. Chairs rolled, feet shuffled. Within 60 seconds, every person on the 7th floor, analysts, traders, risk officers, even the 2 visitors from the 6th floor, stood in a rough semicircle around the main display. Derek looked at Brianna first. "Miss Coleman, stand up, please." Brianna stood. Charcoal blazer, steady hands, the same posture she had held in the risk committee meeting when Philip Stanton told her they would keep an eye on it. 3 months ago, Derek said, Ms. Coleman submitted a 12-page report identifying material discrepancies in TerraVolt Energy's Houston subsidiary. The report documented inflated receivables, fictitious vendor relationships, and accelerating insider selling. It recommended a short position. He paused, let the words settle. That report was dismissed by this team. It was not escalated. It was not acted upon. And it was right. He turned to the screen. Last night, Ms. Coleman's simulated short position turned $5 million into $10,200,000. In the same window, a long position held by a senior member of this team lost approximately $3 million. He didn't say Grant's name. He didn't need to.
The question I'm asking myself this morning is not who won a bet. It's why a 14-month analyst had to fight to be heard on a floor that claims to value rigorous analysis. The room was silent. Effective today, Brianna Coleman is promoted to senior analyst. She will report directly to the chief investment officer. Her research process, the model, the methodology, the framework she built on her own time with her own resources, will be reviewed for integration into our firm-wide risk assessment. He turned to Grant. Grant stood at the edge of the semicircle, arms at his sides, yesterday's shirt wrinkled at the collar. He looked like a man standing in a courtroom, waiting for a sentence he already knew. Mr. Whitfield, your conduct over the past 14 months has been documented, not by HR, by Ms. Coleman. 43 incidents, emails removed from distribution lists, research credited to other team members, language used on this floor that has no place in any professional environment, or any environment at all. Grant's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth to speak. Derek raised one hand, palm flat, the way you stop traffic. The numbers spoke last night. There is nothing left to argue. HR will meet with you at 9. Grant closed his mouth. His eyes moved across the room, searching for an ally, a dissenter, someone who might speak up for 18 years of returns and say that one bad trade didn't erase a career. Nobody moved. Nobody would. Because it wasn't one bad trade. It was 14 months of cruelty, enabled by 14 months of silence. And everyone in that room knew it. They had known it yesterday. They had known it last week. They had known it the first time Grant called Brianna a diversity hire, and the room laughed instead of stopping. They just hadn't been willing to pay the cost of saying so, until the cost of staying silent became higher. Nina Torres was the first to move. She stood up from her chair, slowly, deliberately, and began to clap. Not fast, not performative. A steady, measured rhythm that cut through the silence like a heartbeat. Tyler Brooks joined. Then the woman from Risk. Then 3 more. Then the entire floor. Brianna stood in the middle of it. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She pressed her lips together and nodded once. The way her mother nodded when something hard was finally finished. Not celebration. Acknowledgement. Grant turned and walked to his desk. He opened his drawer, took out a framed photograph, his wife and 2 sons on a boat, placed it in a cardboard box that someone from facilities had left by his chair sometime before 7. He packed in silence. Nobody offered to help. Nobody said goodbye. At 8:55, he picked up the box, walked to the elevator, pressed the button, waited. The doors opened. He stepped in, turned around. For 1 second, less than a second, his eyes found Brianna across the floor. She was already back at her desk, working. 3 screens lit up blue. She didn't look up. The doors closed. By noon, 3 headhunters had contacted Brianna. 2 from competing hedge funds, 1 from a sovereign wealth fund in Abu Dhabi. By end of day, the compliance investigation had turned up something else. 4 trades over the past 14 months where Grant had presented Brianna's original analysis as his own to the CIO. The email trails were clear. The timestamps were undeniable. What Grant had called mentorship was documented, cataloged theft. At 6:15, Brianna called her mother. Dorothy Coleman was between shifts. She had 20 minutes before she had to leave for the laundromat. Brianna told her everything. The bet, the earnings call, the promotion, the cardboard box. Dorothy was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Baby, I always told you, the people who try hardest to make you small are the ones who already know you're bigger than them." Brianna leaned against her kitchen counter and closed her eyes.
For the first time in 14 months, she felt the weight lift. Not all of it, not yet, but enough to breathe without thinking about it. I know, Mama. You eat today? Not yet. Make the rice and beans. Brianna laughed, a real one, the first in a long time. Yes, ma'am. 6 months later, Brianna Coleman sat at a desk she had never imagined sitting at. Corner office, east side of the 7th floor. The same floor where Grant Whitfield had once told her that her bloodline was her ceiling. The nameplate on her door read, Brianna Coleman, Senior Analyst, Equity Research. Below it, in smaller letters, Team Lead. She managed 4 analysts now. 3 of them had more experience than she'd had when Grant threw her report in the trash. One of them, a 23-year-old from Howard University named Allison Price, had applied specifically because she read about what happened on the Ashford Capital trading floor. I wanted to work for the person who did that, Allison said in her interview. Brianna hired her on the spot. The portfolio Brianna oversaw had outperformed its benchmark by 340 basis points in the first 2 quarters. The model she built in her apartment, the one she had funded with 3 years of savings and run on a personal Bloomberg terminal, was now integrated into the firm's risk assessment framework. Derek Ashford had called it the single most valuable piece of original research this firm has produced in a decade. Brianna didn't frame that quote. She did print it. She kept it in her desk drawer, next to a photograph of Dorothy Coleman standing in front of the laundromat on North Avenue, wearing a blue sweatshirt and smiling. Grant Whitfield's departure from Ashford Capital made the trade press within a week. The articles were careful. They used words like transition and pursuing other opportunities. But the finance community knew. Stories like that don't stay quiet. Within a month, 3 other firms had quietly reviewed their own floors for similar patterns. 2 of them found them. Grant landed at a smaller fund in Connecticut. Lower profile, lower capital, no corner office, no magazine covers. The Oracle nickname didn't follow him. Nicknames never do when the story behind them changes. As for the 11 analysts who had stood on that floor and said nothing for 14 months, some of them stayed, some left. All of them carried something from that morning with them. Not guilt, exactly. Something heavier. The knowledge that they had watched someone get torn apart in front of them day after day and had chosen comfort over courage. That kind of knowledge doesn't fade. It settles. It sits in the back of your throat every time you see something wrong and have to decide, again, whether to speak. Tyler Brooks stayed at the firm. He never mentioned page 9 again, but he started forwarding Brianna's research to the risk committee without being asked. He didn't do it for credit. He did it because silence has a cost, and he had already paid more than he could afford. On a Wednesday morning in April, 6 months and 1 day after the bet, Brianna arrived at the office at 6:45, the same time she had always arrived. She sat at her new desk, opened her terminal. 3 screens lit up blue. At 7 o'clock, the elevator chimed. Allison Price stepped out, laptop bag over her shoulder, coffee in hand. She looked nervous. It was her 3rd week. Brianna caught her eye across the floor and nodded. One nod, the kind that says, I see you. You belong here. Keep going. The same nod Nina Torres had given her once when no one else would. Some things you pass forward, not because anyone asks you to, because someone did it for you when it mattered, and you remember what it felt like to be the only person in the room who needed it. If you've ever been underestimated at work, if someone told you that your background, your skin, your bloodline was your ceiling, drop your story in the comments. Because stories like Brianna's don't start in corner offices. They start in the comments section, where someone reads it and thinks, that could be me. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Because next week, we've got another story. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. Man,
Imagine getting called a stray on a Tuesday and sitting in a corner office by spring. If you're out there keeping your head down, building something nobody asked for, your moment's coming. Don't flinch. Bet yourself.